It is the most natural thing for any of these little boys or girls with us this evening to want to aspire to be the head of state of the nation of their birth. It is incongruous for us to contemplate that the King of Spain could be the King of England, or that the President of Brazil could be the President of the United States of America. And if we feel that those things are incongruous, then we must accept 54 years on from independence that one of these boys or girls must be the President of Barbados. We ask simply that persons do not take that assertion of belief in ourselves and in the worthiness of our state to have a Barbadian as its head of state as an action that is inimical to the interests of others, because it is not intended to be. It is simply a recognition that, as a sister of mine said elsewhere in the region, time come. The time has come for us to take care of our house without disrespecting anyone else's house. And the second point that the world gave up on us on before starting was the World Conference on Racism, against racism and xenophobia. And I stand here today conscious that this is an issue whose time has now come. 20 years ago, David Comijong and myself in Chile, along with others for 2.5 days, literally without any rest, tried to persuade the Americas that the time had come to put a development compact in place for the colonies that had been unfared, for the wealth that had been extracted for centuries, and for the fact that we then were faced to build out a nation without the wealth that was extracted from us, plantation by plantation, and across the interests of government, the revenue of government, all taken. And it meant, therefore, that when Grantley Adams sought to right wrongs that would see persons be able to vote in this country without having to own property, how many of you out there know that the same way people could go and vote in St. George North last week without owning a pin, a common pin, that prior to that, prior to 1951 election, you had to own property in order to vote in this country. We see in the United States of America calls being made about people who are disenfranchised or excluded from the voting process. It is a concept that is alien to us, because we fought to give everyone who is over the age and who is a citizen of this country or of the Commonwealth the right to vote. But just as Sir Grantley fought for that, just as Arabara fought for independence, we too have recognized that the development trajectory of Barbados since 1966 ought to have and could have achieved more, just as the development trajectory of any of the Caribbean nations who were previous colonies ought to have achieved more. And it is largely because, my friends, we did not have anything in the kitty to start with when we became independent nations. How do you bring about emancipation? Because it is cruel and inhuman, and you compensate the owners for cruel, inhuman punishment and treatment of people, but you leave the victims of that inhuman and cruel punishment and treatment to have nothing to start off with but fair promises, and in some instances no promises. How do you recognize that the the displacement of an institution merits compensation in 1838, but you don't recognize that the displacement of constitutional governance equally recognize the need for compensation and something to start with as a nation in the world. And instead, what we got was versions of history and promises and indeed not even apologies. Earl Lovelace won the Commonwealth Book Prize for a book that should be compulsory for every Caribbean citizen to read, and it is called Salt. And the book speaks about the need for forgiveness and reparations if we are to move forward as one people without the scars of history tugging us back into periods of time that we no longer want to visit. I ask us therefore to recognize that under the chairmanship of the committee, the CARICOM's Reparations Committee, the chairmanship of Sir Hilary, who became involved once I stepped back and became Attorney General, and over the last 2 decades he has done yeoman's service in popularizing and sensitizing the global and the academic community in particular of the need for right things to be done for the wrongs that were perpetrated against our peoples. But we are not foolish or gullible. And in the same way that this Parliament moved from being an instrument of oppression and iniquity to being a tool of empowerment for our people, and it is still taking time, because as much as we pass legislation making everybody equal, we cannot pass legislation to emancipate people's minds. That is the process of education and sensitization. And I ask us as a people to recognize, therefore, that the simple removal of this statue on the United Nations Day of International Tolerance is first and foremost a symbol that we are ready to take other steps in the development of our nationhood and in the building of our people to be that proud set of persons who can take on the world without having the history, the historic scars, pulling them back to that previous age. I ask us equally to recognize that the work must continue, but the greatest battles are no longer in Parliament, no longer at the level of our head of state, no longer in the physical infrastructure that we will put in place to remind you of what happened and what we must not go back to. The greatest challenge comes, my dear, with you talking to your daughter, and you talking to your son, and you talking to your nephew, and you talking to your niece, and you talking to your neighbor, and you talking to each and every one of us, and in the schools, Santia, because if the stories are not told, and if the stories are not owned by us, at the same time as we accept the responsibility for forging our destiny rather than being mendicant and asking others for help, if we can do those things, then I have every confidence, my people, that we will be a stronger and better nation, and that we will not only lift up the well-being, spiritual and physical well-being of Barbadians, but we will add to the efforts of global civilization to make the people across the world more sensitive to our responsibilities to each other and more aware of the need to remove the divisions that literally lead to physical warfare, to mental warfare and abuse, and perhaps worse than all, to economic and financial exploitation in the name of systems that are designed not to assist people from removing themselves from the bowels of poverty, but are designed to be able to concentrate wealth effectively in the hands of the people. our task and our path is not easy. But if these streets could talk, they would tell you that the path walked by those who came off those ships was equally not easy. But they didn't literally shy away from it. If they did, we would not be here today. They dug deep, and they understood that becoming resilient meant first and foremost commanding political power and thereafter economic power. You ask yourselves, how does a country like the United States of America and Brazil still have the difficulties that they do in the third decade of the 21st century? It is largely because they have never come to grips with dealing with the remnants of slavery and the deal necessary for those who were previously slaves. In Barbados, we haven't done it perfectly, but we've done a hell of a lot better through free education, through the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, through access to health care, being able to take care of our own. And while we may be hard on ourselves sometimes, let us remember that we have taken a people who literally, according to the Moyne Commission, were among the poorest of the poor in the Americas. And we have taken those persons in this nation across successive governments to be able to rise to the point where we can walk tall and we can influence global civilization on the things that truly matter, especially at a time when the conversation relates to existential threats that go beyond the capacity of human beings to appropriately stymie them, but can only work together to ensure that we mitigate the consequences of those existential threats. I ask Barbadians to do that, not at the level of governments alone. Take care of your children in your homes. Teach them well. Raise them well. Morality matters. Doing the right thing matters. Doing the right thing is not doing the wrong thing. One is spelled W-R-O-N-G and one is spelled R-I-G-H-T. If we don't teach each other, especially our children, right from wrong, if we don't teach them to look in the mirror and love who they see, to understand that black is beautiful, to understand that your hair is your hair given to you by a divine order, to understand that the most important things in life are not money. Money can help you make things a little easier, but the most important thing in life is generosity of spirit and making sure that we take each other hand in hand, because there but for the grace of God goes I. Any one of us can fall at any time. What matters in our society are the principles of Ubuntu. I am because we are. And the day that we reject we, the day that we reject we for I alone, that only I and I can fight the battle. And I and I will not always be standing to fight the battle. We have to recognize that solidarity and coming together as a family, as a community, as a nation, as a region, as a civilization globally, that this is the only way the human race will make it. Let us, to the task, ensure that we pass the baton to those children that I've asked you to speak to in your homes, in your schools, and in your churches. And if we do that, then hopefully one day people will speak about the craftsmen of our faith in 2020 who determined that the images that populate our tongue must be images that edify our people and allow these children to know that they can be the best that they can be. Thank you, and God bless you all. God.